he just sits back and just kind of like folds his fingers. And he's like, well, I don't think that you have depression. And I don't think that you have anxiety. I was like, oh, really? Well, that's news to me.
Hey friends, Christina here with a brief disclaimer / trigger warning. This week we talk about mental health diagnoses, and we want to emphasize that despite our feelings on the matter, this is a nuanced topic, and we are not professional psychologists. Additionally, we talk about eating disorder diagnoses, including weight and stigma that may be triggering to some listeners. Stay safe, and as always, our inbox is open for feedback. Okay, here's the episode.
Hello.
Hello. Pickles and vodka late night edition.
Yeah.
It's like 78 degrees and sunny outside.
It is here too.
Oh my God.
I don't know that it's sunny anymore, but it's 77.
Twinsies.
Yay.
It's so nice. Like,
I know, it feels so good.
I worked at the grocery store today because I have tomorrow off. Someone covered my shift, so I worked on a Friday, which is unusual for me. But we had the door open because it was so nice outside. I was just like sitting at the register staring longingly out the door.
I know, when it's gotten nice out the last couple times, it's like you turn into children when we're at work. We're like, can we work outside?
We are all children when the sun comes out. Just want to prance in the grass. And like, my coworker was like, I want to do a backflip.
So do I, but I can't.
I was going to say, can you?
No. I
can do a headstand. And like, once I'm on my head, I can like flip over backwards.
I can do a back bend. Like from standing, I can go into a back bend.
Oh my God, that's impressive. I just like fall over when I try to do that.
My friend taught me how to do it. She said, you learn to do it on a bed. You're not worried about falling because it doesn't hurt. And on top of that, you know, the bed is like not as stable as the ground. So it's actually easier once you can do it on a bed.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Not me going and practicing right when I'm done with this.
I know.
God. So my roommate's gone and the door is open. So I thought the cats wouldn't be an issue. But Pirate is at my feet fucking with the plastic bag. Okay, I'm putting my trash up high. Anyway, hello. We should probably get started.
He's a big baby.
He is. Oh, Pirate, what are we going to do with you?
Oh.
Do you have a tagline?
I just came up with one. It's not my favorite, but yeah, I have one.
Well, don't tell the listeners that.
We'll cut that part out.
No.
I know. We don't. We don't cut these things out. Okay. Welcome to Pickles and Vodka.
Wait, you didn't say hello, friends.
Oh, I didn't. See, I haven't done this in so long.
I know.
Hello, friends. I'm sorry.
Hello, friends. I'm not sorry.
And welcome to Pickles and Vodka, mental health podcast, where we all have issues, and we're going to talk about them. I'm one of your co-hosts, Lauren.
Wait, say that one more time.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Lauren.
And I'm your other co-host, Christina. What are we talking about today, Lauren? What are we doing?
Well, we're not going to jump into that. First, where are you at?
Where am I at? Well, I guess you're keeping me on the edge of my seat. I don't know what topic Lauren has chosen, so...
I've said nothing about it.
Nothing. I'm really excited. Let's see. It's been an okay week. I've been thinking of you a lot this week because I have been at an absolute loss for words to describe my feelings. Like my therapist was sick on Thursday, and so we did our session via Zoom, which is not ideal.
No, I agree.
But I was super distracted, and the cats were catting, and my roommate was bustling around, and I was just like, it was a really bad session. I was just stuttering and like trying to come up with words the whole time. And at the end, I was like, what was the point of that? Like, do you ever feel like that?
Yeah. And I was wondering, do you feel like, because I mean, obviously we're not in the same place, and I don't find it, super difficult that we do this through our computers and however many miles and everything like that. But like a therapy session in particular, to do that on Zoom just always feels, awkward and ends up feeling kind of pointless. And I don't like it.
I mean, the one upside was that we got to see each other's cats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But basically what we talked about was the fact that things have been looking up for me. I have a few opportunities that are coming up. I'm starting to be more stable with my mood and my financial situation. And basically, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, I feel, one, that it is not trustworthy.
Oh, yeah.
And two, I feel like I've lost my identity in a way. Like, I'm slowly losing my identity because, like...
I say it like that because this could really relate to my topic.
Again, I don't know what Lauren's going to talk about. But yeah, we've talked about this before a little bit here and there, but when you've been, we'll say sick, just as an all-encompassing term, for so long, like decades, when you're not sick, it's very strange and you feel like something's wrong, even though it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's not even bad. It's just you're at a loss. Like, that's what I was.
Well, yeah, like I was telling her, I am the person who relapses and then gets help and then talks about it and then relapses again. Like, that's my pattern.
Yeah.
And I've been struggling with writing this week because nothing's on fire, so I don't know what to write about. And I've been having to deal with the idea that things might be okay. And I don't know, I just get this like sick feeling in my stomach.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. Like, obviously, I'm glad that I'm no longer in a crisis. I'm glad that things are looking up.
Right.
And also, I don't take it for granted. I know it could turn around tomorrow.
Yeah, I understand all of that. I've definitely felt all of that in my life.
But yeah, I've been riding my bike a lot. The weather is beautiful. I'm just glad to be here.
Aww.
And tomorrow I am going to Richmond with Rune, who was a guest on the podcast a few episodes ago. We're going to this sci-fi convention.
Oh, cool.
They invited me. I have no idea what to expect. I don't normally do that kind of thing.
Oh, that doesn't matter. I feel like those kind of things end up being fun when you're just like, I'm not even sure what this is, but I'm going to experience.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. Where are you at?
Well, interesting that you said like writing has been hard because it's been the same for me this week. And, I haven't really been, but for some reason I've been really inspired. And honestly, I think I've been partially inspired by you because I know, I know that you've been doing a lot of, like you were going through your old journals and I don't know, what were you like transposing them or something like that?
I transcribed all my journals.
That's what I meant to say. I was like, not transpose. You didn't like write them in Japanese or something.
Isn't transposing when you like listen to music? Yeah.
Music, yeah.
Yeah, the ultimate purpose is to write a memoir, to use them for a memoir.
Yeah, that's something that I've always thought of off and on. And I think I've come to the conclusion that, like in the past, I'm sure I've wanted to, thinking that it would be read. And now when I think of it, I don't even necessarily want it to be read. It's like I want to for me, it's something, because I'm sure you find doing this that like just the act of writing it is therapeutic in itself.
It really is.
For some reason, that's just been like really strong on my mind the last couple of weeks, but I just get stuck and I can't, and I don't know where to start. And I realized actually yesterday when I was thinking of things, I was like, well, some of the reasons is because some of that shit gets dark really fast.
You've shared some journal entries before on the podcast, and they're pretty dark.
Yeah. And in particular, I just wanted to share like this little thought nugget that got me started thinking about that.
Thought nugget.
Is, for some reason, probably because like lots of coworkers have just had babies or are having babies. But I remembered this story just like randomly. Like feel like I've pushed it out of my mind of my mom telling me, again, I have no clue how we got in this conversation, but we were talking about like breastfeeding your children versus formula feeding.
Okay.
And she happened to say during that conversation, she's like, my theory is that kids that got breastfed more end up as larger people.
That is a statement.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God.
Like she said she felt that way because when my brother was born, then people were very like anti that. And so it was all, like formula feed your kids. So that's what she did. And then just because people were telling you like, this is better. But then she said like that she knew my dad's mom just like breastfed her kids whenever they were hungry. And I know they are all larger people, but if they all are, that also could be just plain genetics.
It could be anything.
Uh-huh.
Like literally anything.
but it just made me like, for some reason, thinking of that conversation yesterday made me put all of the pieces together because like, yeah, my brother is the one who just, was the kid that could be a human garbage disposal and never like gain an ounce. And I was just an average kid. And by the time I came along, then, they were promoting breastfeeding more. So I'm sure, like my mom did it because of that. But I was just like, but with her having that thought, was she already like limiting it? Like, is that her first act to her child to try and control her future weight?
Wait, so you were restricting before you had an eating disorder, basically? Like someone...
Basically from the day I was born.
Wow. Holy shit. That's actually crazy.
I know. And also the idea of like wanting to write my memoirs and getting stuck is I was just like, I actually just might not be in a place to get that dark right now. I don't know if I want to put that on myself at this moment because that's going to have some repercussions when you realize these things and you think about them.
Yeah, especially if you are in like early quote unquote recovery or still struggling, It's not, I mean, most therapists would say it's not a good idea. I would start small with maybe another memory or something.
Yeah.
Something a little less dark. Or even just like, I went to the park the other day and I wrote down a list of memories that just came to me, and then I picked one to write about.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I ended up writing like 5 pages, and it did get really dark, to be fair.
Because I know another thing that I was thinking about is, whenever I think about something like that, I feel like I just need to go like chronologically. And obviously, like the early memories are fuzzier and I have to think more to access them and everything. And usually I have one, maybe from like 10 years ago that's just like in the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, but I got to write all this to get to that. I'm like, maybe I should just write the thing I'm thinking about.
I'm the opposite. I write the fresher stuff first, and then it unlocks memories as I go.
Oh, that's good too.
Also, when you're writing memoirs, like so much of the work takes place off of the page.
Yeah.
Like I've talked a lot about the photo project I was doing for my family where I was organizing all of our photos going back to like 1991. And that unlocked a lot of memories.
Oh, I bet.
So I have like these index cards, and I started picking photos that with memories attached to them, and I would write down a few keywords on the index card and paperclip it to the photo. And so now I have all these photos with notes on them that in my drawer that I can just pull out and write about. I haven't done it yet.
But you have so many good ideas to get started. I love
I've been trying to do this for so long. Like, that's the thing. It's been like 6 years of thinking about this. It's going to be a slow process, and you can't really do it until you're ready. But at the same time, you do need to do something. Like, you can't just wait to be ready because you're not.
Right.
That's exciting, though.
Yeah.
I think you totally should write your memoirs. Like you're a good writer and you have a lot of experiences that people would want to hear about, I think. I think you could help a lot of people.
And like I said, like my thought is just kind of like, I don't care if nobody reads it. It's mostly for me.
Lauren, you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
You need to start a Substack.
I know. I have been writing a little more on my Dreamwidth journal, which is what Vicky turned me on to kind of like replace LiveJournal.
Oh, yeah.
So I have actually been like writing my thoughts and putting them out there occasionally.
Well, I can't read them there.
Well, if I get off my ass and start a Substack, then I can always like copy them over there.
Yeah, that would be okay. You should do that.
Okay.
For me, it's all about me.
Exactly.
And my needs.
Yes.
So what are we talking about today?
So our topic is diagnoses. Diagnoses. Okay. So I was like, not positive I'm going to say the plural correctly. But I will tell you a little bit of how I got that thought. I was messing around on Facebook. I mean, I'm never on Facebook anymore. So that was a total random thing to begin with. And there's a really popular eating disorder community that, shows up on my reading page. And again, like it's nothing that I have any connection with except for the random times I go on Facebook. Sometimes I'm just like, what are people talking about now?
Yeah.
And I just happened to see 2 posts on there. And one of them was somebody that was very upset that they saw their medical records and it had an eating disorder listed as their diagnosis. And they're like, but I am in recovery. And they're like, why is that still here? And, some people explain like some reasons why. And then just like a couple later, then there was another person that was very upset that they saw their records and they're like, it said that my diagnosis is eating disorder. And clearly they wanted it specifically to be anorexia because doesn't everyone? I mean,
yeah. We probably should explain that phenomenon.
I was going to say, I figured we would because I was like, that's kind of one of my little like pet peeves anyways, but
same.
Yeah. But
as I fall prey to it.
But it was interesting, to see just like right next to each other, like somebody really upset that they still had this diagnosis and then somebody really upset they did not get the specific one they wanted. I was like, that's coming from two different schools of thought.
That's a pretty good sample, though, of the eating disorder community, at least, I feel like. Because I know people like you who didn't get diagnosed until later and you never really considered it an eating disorder.
And I've talked about it, how like even after, it's like I didn't even want to say the word and relating to myself. I was just like, but it's always just been this kind of silly thing that I do that's not really a problem.
Exactly. Yeah, and meanwhile, I'm 16, I purge once, and I'm like, I have bulimia now. That's a really great topic. I feel like we're going to have a lot to say about it.
I hope so, yeah. And I felt like it really went into, like when you started talking about identity, because I was like, that is a big thing I feel like is for both of those. Like people don't want it to be their identity, or that is how they feel like they identify.
Totally. Right now, and at this point in my life, I have really mixed feelings about diagnoses. Because on one hand, it's incredibly validating. You can get access to the treatment you need. You can get access to like specialized care.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can make it your identity and you can say like, oh, I am anorexic.
Yeah.
Or like, I am depressed. Like making it
who you are,
not like I'm a person with anorexia.
Yeah.
And to each their own, some people might be like, that might be helpful for them because like you, maybe they went their whole lives refusing to admit they had this, and then accepting the diagnosis might be a turning point for them.
Yeah. Like when I hear people say that, like, don't say I am this, that I have mixed feelings about that. I do agree that sometimes I don't think that it's that horrible thing that people are making it out to be.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you need diagnoses to, like I said, to access a lot of things. It's a huge barrier to some people getting the help they need. And not everyone is able to get a diagnosis either. And so that's another complicated issue.
Yeah. One of the first questions that I jotted down was just like, what even is the point of a diagnosis? And I immediately answered, I was like, mainly insurance, sadly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't even think about that.
That's really it. That's the like number one reason.
Can you explain briefly like why that helps?
Really a lot of things like you were saying, like a lot of treatments you cannot access unless you have this diagnosis. I mean, especially I feel like in the mental health world, people are not going to jump and be like, yeah, you need extensive treatment for this eating disorder that someone just said you might have, like your mom, like
yeah, exactly. Oh my God, that reminds me. I'm going to log into MyChart and list off all of the diagnoses they have for me. Because some of them I really don't agree with. It's like they just put them there to put them there. But now I'm thinking, well, maybe it was for insurance.
Probably a lot. Yeah. I'm going to see if I can get on mine too.
Yes.
Comparing our MyCharts.
Okay. I found it.
Okay.
So, major depression, duh. Generalized anxiety disorder, alcohol use disorder, severe, medication abuse, Benadryl, cannabis use disorder, substance-induced mood disorder, nicotine use disorder, history of hallucinogen abuse, cluster B personality disorder, suicidal ideation, non-suicidal self-harm, eating disorder, psychosocial stressors, and ADHD.
Wow.
But like, I don't even identify with like half of those.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. What is a disorder?
Yeah. Like some of that sounds like, I don't know, just because it's something that has happened.
Yeah. I mean, not that those are diagnoses per se, like official diagnoses, but when I say them all in a row like that, it just sounds like a lot. And I don't know. It almost feels like I'm bragging.
No, I mean, I don't get that at least.
Or like, oh, look at me. I'm so special. I have all these quote unquote disorders.
But I'm thinking of stuff like, recently when you talked about your therapist saying that you probably were OCD and like that bothered you.
Yeah, that's another one. No news on that, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, I might have OCD. And like, that's why I say the idea of diagnoses has been kind of complicated for me lately, because I can keep piling on the diagnoses, but at some point I need to just like live my life, but also maybe I really need them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about diagnoses. Someone else has to diagnose you.
Yeah.
And like, you can't diagnose yourself.
Because everyone can try. And
Lots
they do.
of people do.
Uh-huh.
Just go on Instagram.
Or geez, look at like commercials that are all like for different medications. As I feel like they're trying to get people to like self-diagnose.
Oh my God, that's a whole other thing. Self-diagnosis. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done this too.
Sorry, I finally pulled mine up.
Oh, tell me, what does it say? What are your problems?
It's not as long, I think, mainly because I just like erased like my earlier history. But anorexia, laxative abuse, the one I loved, malaise and fatigue.
Isn't that everyone?
Right. Then anxiety disorder, unspecified, and severe episodes of recurrent major depressive disorder without psychotic features.
Ooh.
That's me.
Thank God there are no psychotic features.
I know.
No offense to our psychotic listeners. We love you.
Malaise and fatigue.
Malaise and fatigue. What are you, a Victorian woman?
Exactly. Sounds so, like a Jane Austen character or something.
Where's the fainting couch?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's great. But like, how do you feel about those? I mean, obviously we're laughing about it.
Yeah, but like the same way that you started saying about me, that is like the first thing I saw is like anorexia nervosa. And I was like, no. I was just like subpar eating disorder. Take that one off.
Do we want to talk about our history of diagnoses? Like a timeline?
Sure.
Because I got diagnosed with depression when I was 16. That was my very first diagnosis.
And mine, as I've talked about before, was anxiety. Because
yeah,
I had anxiety attacks pretty bad in college. So about 19.
Yeah. And at the time, it really did feel like it was going to solve all my problems. Like people were going to start taking me seriously. I was going to get medicated. And I did. But it didn't solve all my problems.
Yeah.
And let's see, the next diagnosis was bulimia. And then like 8 years later, it turned into anorexia subtype binge purge.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly thought they made a mistake.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not anorexic. Like, I'm not. Well, okay. Honestly, I was like, I'm not skinny enough to be anorexic.
I, of course, said the same.
Yeah, I mean, let's just be real. That's what people think. If, like, again, we might have to go further into that phenomenon of people wanting to be diagnosed with anorexia, because the normies listening might be like, what the fuck?
Right.
Why would you want? And that's the thing, not just with eating disorders, but other mental health diagnoses. There's different tiers of what is socially acceptable. For instance, we've talked about borderline personality disorder.
Which is one that I got early on.
Yeah, which is one that is still heavily stigmatized.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of stereotypes about people with BPD. Or like OCD, for instance. Like, you just imagine someone like ultra clean and has to have everything a certain way.
Yeah, like, oh, they just like clean and count things all the time.
Yeah, so like diagnoses have different stereotypes. I guess that's a negative thing, because you can start kind of projecting those stereotypes onto yourself.
Something I wrote, I feel like, as a pro is just that it gives you like more connection sometimes, because it's kind of like we talked about, like sometimes if you just don't know, if you're just sitting here just feeling like I'm fucking crazy, I can't figure out what's going on, and if somebody tells you, then even on your own you can like find a support group or something like that, be like, wow, this is the thing I'm dealing with, so maybe I could talk to other people that are.
It can be nice like that. I mean, when I got diagnosed with ADHD at 31, I did feel this immense wave of relief. Because prior to that, I'll admit it, I was self-diagnosing. And that's kind of where you're at right now, because you're seeking a diagnosis for ADHD. And it just comes down to knowing yourself and like taking it with a grain of salt, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. It was really validating to get that diagnosis. But with that said, it didn't change anything right away.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on it.
Yeah, it doesn't immediately solve things. You know, even if it like gives you some access to like a medication that could help, it still doesn't mean like it's a miracle and like the next day you're like, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm managing it perfectly now.
Like I still go to therapy regularly and yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, you said you were in college the first time you got a mental health diagnosis?
Yeah. I had mixed feelings because you know, as most people who've experienced like major panic attacks know that when you don't know what it is, you just think that you're dying.
Yeah.
And so, you know, of course I did. And because they manifest like so physically, it seemed like something physical has to be wrong. And so I think when I first heard it, then I felt like whether they were doing so or not, I felt really dismissed. You know, like I was feeling like I'm going in because I feel like there is something honestly wrong with me. And they're like, it's just a panic attack.
Just a panic attack.
Like no one said those words, but that's the way I heard it.
Well, did they ask about like what was causing the panic attacks?
No, because when this happened, you know, like everything was like I was just such a mess that my parents just like took me into the ER. So it wasn't until later that I actually like saw a therapist who does more of that kind of work. You know,
yeah,
this was someone that could just say like, they're panic attacks. Here's some meds.
When I was living with that ex in DC, one night I woke up to him like gasping and clutching his chest, and he said, "I think I'm having a heart attack."
Mm-hmm.
And so I drove him to the ER and we were there for like 2 hours and they told him like, "Oh, you're having a panic attack." And I think that was really eye-opening for him, but it was also hard because yeah, he did feel kind of dismissed. And you know, he's a man, so there's extra stigma there.
Yes.
But yeah, that was rough. Like I don't have panic attacks. I never have. I have never seen one before.
Okay.
And so yeah, I guess before that I didn't know it could be so physical.
Yeah.
To the extent that, yeah, you do think you're dying.
I mean, yeah, I remember just like walking around constantly feeling like I was either going to pass out or throw up. And like I was just going to, yeah, like die basically if I didn't stop moving. Like that's what my brain was telling me.
So did they diagnose you with anxiety disorder then?
Yeah, I think they just, you know, like they couldn't really like get too much into it without knowing too much. They're just like, we'll just say, you know, like generalized anxiety with panic attacks.
So when did you get diagnosed with your eating disorder?
Technically, because I don't think like in the medical world, I don't think like my therapist could have done so because I'm not sure like what kind of like medical license you need to like formally diagnose.
I mean, you need to be a psychologist.
That's what I thought. So technically the first time I went to treatment, I was 35.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we have very different experiences
Mm-hmm.
in terms of diagnoses, at least.
It's like she could see it. She was like, no fucking shit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you went to treatment like right after getting diagnosed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like that's what finally propelled you to seek treatment, or was it kind of a result of hitting a wall and being like, I need help?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like right up until, you know, like it was planned to happen. Then I was still saying that it's just like, but I'm still getting through life. This is maybe exhibiting some eating disordered behaviors is all I'm doing. You know, I wanted it to be like, not really a big deal.
And that's the thing, that you can have symptoms of a disorder without having the disorder. Like, how many people do you know that are eating disordered but don't have an eating disorder technically?
Tons.
And it gets so muddy. And that's why it's important, like, if you do seek diagnosis, to have it be by a professional.
Yeah. And it's a really tricky place, I feel like. I mean, I don't think that enough people, you know, probably get the help or listen to like they should, because it seems to me that to some degree at least, even if you are just saying like, oh, I wouldn't fit like the diagnostic criteria. And it's like, yeah, but you still should get help because it's been proven so much. Early intervention is more helpful. And why do you think like telling someone like, can you just like go get worse and then we can help you?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, that's the bullshit part of diagnoses. Like atypical anorexia is bullshit. Like, it's anorexia.
Right.
Just because you're in a larger body doesn't mean you don't have anorexia. And we've had so many guests on the podcast who have talked about the struggles they've faced getting that diagnosis and trying to navigate treatment and all this stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I felt like that with other things too, because, you know, like I've been diagnosed with depression before. And I know whenever people like asked about it, then I was hoping it, especially at the start before we learned that I've said the term. What is my term? Treatment-resistant depression.
Treatment-resistant depression.
Yes. Before I learned that, especially in the beginning, I was like hoping like, well, I'd love to at least try a medication because if it helps, that'd be great. But, you know, people would ask you questions about it and I would know, having researched and looked at it my own, that it's just kind of like, did I say that, you know, like I had enough like low days that they're going to diagnose it as real, or are they going to,
like, did you paint it in a bad enough light?
Yeah, or are they going to be, you know, like, well, this just sounds like everybody sometimes feels down a couple days a month, and that's probably all it is. I'm like, I don't know. Is they going to believe me?
That's probably a diagnosis, Lauren.
Probably.
Imposter syndrome. Not an official diagnosis that I know of.
But it's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a self-diagnosis.
So I had looked up and jotted down like what I thought were like some basic pros and cons of having a diagnosis. And they were really, really kind of like more surface level, I feel like. Like for pros, I said, you know, like it can give you connection, it can reduce isolation, it can make certain treatments available. For cons, I said, you know, like you could see it as just a label. An interesting one I found is clinicians don't always agree, which I would feel like, especially like because mental health is really kind of like interpretable.
Yeah.
And I was like,
oh, you mean they don't agree with each other?
Yeah. You know, like what if you are like relieved, like, oh, and actually I've had this happen to me too. What if you are like so relieved that like something, you know, explains what's going on in your brain, and then you go see someone else and they're like, no, you don't have that.
Oh my God. Misdiagnoses are also something we could talk about. I mean, I don't think I've ever been misdiagnosed with anything, but I've heard from friends who have.
So again, going back to my first time in residential treatment, there's this psychiatrist there who is so full of himself and is just, I don't know, like known by people. Some people responded to it well, that he just kind of clearly thinks he's the smartest person in the room.
He's authoritative.
He does spend a lot of time with people, but that also means like he has no respect, I feel like, for anyone's time. Because like my first appointment with him, I waited an hour and 15 minutes past the appointment time.
Oh my God. That's not professional.
No. And so then I go in and he talks to me for, a good, you know, like 50 minutes to an hour. And so, you know, he does hear a lot, asks a lot of questions, finds out a lot of what I have to say. And then, you know, he just sits back and just kind of like folds his fingers and he's like, well, I don't think that you have depression. And I don't think that you have anxiety. I was like, oh, really? Well, that's news to me.
Well, then what was up? Like, how do you explain that then? Your symptoms?
I don't even remember like what bullshit he said after that, because I refused to go to another appointment with him. They had another psychiatrist and I'm like, nope, send me to the other one.
That's incredibly dismissive.
Yeah.
Wow. Again, emphasis on like, I think you don't have depression or anxiety. Like, okay, but that's just your opinion, man.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like I've sat here and talked to you, for like 50 minutes and have heard my whole history of the past, you know, like 15, 20 years that I've been dealing with it.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
Was that just me making it up all that time?
And that's the tricky thing, because we don't always know if we can trust ourselves. Like, we put ourselves in the hands of these professionals to diagnose us in many cases. And that's a huge responsibility, because like misdiagnosis could result in years of like wasted time, you know, focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah, like what if like the opposite of what happened to me? What if the first person you go to is just like, no, that's not the case. Nope, it's, you know, it's just this, and they're wrong. And then you miss it all those years thinking like, oh, well, you know, this professional told me that that's not the issue. So
yeah, that's why you really need to give people the benefit of the doubt. You really need to fucking listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I really appreciate it when providers actually take the time to explain the diagnosis and educate
Yes.
me on it. Because sometimes, yeah, they can just slap a label on you and send you on your merry way in 5 minutes. Like, that's happened to me.
Yeah, same.
Um, and yeah, I feel like, here's a question. Do you feel like you can outgrow a diagnosis?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that is something I know we've talked about. I'd go back to borderline.
Well, yeah, why don't you summarize that again real quick for people who haven't heard?
Yeah, basically I got diagnosed as borderline when I was, I think, 23. And I mean, I think a lot of it came on. That's when I was living with like the really toxic ex. And I think, dealing with him kind of sent me off the edge. But the way I was dealing with it, I agreed with them then. And I've even talked about how like it's before that was as popular of a term. So I did not know when I got like that was one where I was excited to hear the diagnosis because it was like, oh my gosh, you've explained why I feel crazy. There's a reason I fit all of this. And of course, then, later you find out over the years, you hear more things and it's like, oh, everyone thinks we're terrible people. Cool.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I didn't realize I was growing out of because I think maybe like when I heard all that negative stuff, then I just tried to, like not think about it. And while I was like purposefully like pushing it out of my mind, like we're not going to think about this, we're just going to pretend like it's not a thing, then I did learn better ways to cope with things. And, that's why I feel like today, if I told somebody, like, hey, I was diagnosed as borderline, they'd be like, really? I'm like, I know, I don't fit it at all.
Well, yeah, that was my reaction.
Yeah.
And not to say that everyone with a particular diagnosis will display the same symptoms or like everyone is different, obviously. And I think it's really easy to take a diagnosis and use it as a blanket characterization.
Yeah.
Like everyone with depression has suicidal ideation, for instance.
Yeah.
That's probably not true.
No,
I mean, sure, most people with
I think a
depression.
lot. Usually you have, yes.
I mean, that's just an example.
But yeah, no, that is good because even myself, like obviously, not never, but I do feel like a lot of my time where I've spent like majorly depressed is also knowing that I don't know what not living looks like and I'm not really anxious to find out. I just know, like that I hate life right now.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that scares me, not to get dark, but the thing that scares me is just like not having choices anymore.
Yeah.
Like once you do that, you don't have any more choices. And I'd rather be in control.
Yeah. What? We like being in control?
Shocker.
I know. So I think like with all of these things about like why other people say, it could be good or bad and why people do and don't want it. I just wanted us both to ask in regards to diagnoses you've had, like, why did you want it and why did you not want it?
Ooh, I mean, that's tricky because I feel like, for me at least, desire had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like, I know that I have depression. Like, I know that I'm bulimic. It's not that I was wanting to be diagnosed with it. I just kind of assumed that it would happen at some point. But I guess in terms of my reaction, it happened so long ago. I can't barely remember, but obviously I wanted it because for all the reasons we've already listed. But to be honest, I wanted attention that I wasn't getting.
Yeah.
And that diagnosis opened the door to that kind of attention. I mean, that's just the honest truth.
Yeah.
Attention is not a dirty word. Go listen to our episode about it. And yeah, I guess, well, so as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, I tried to join the Air Force in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually denied me in part because of my mental health diagnoses.
That was actually something, that I had as one of the cons too, is I was like, it sometimes can affect finding a job, depending on what you want to do. There still are things that say, you cannot do this with.
And that's something to consider. Like, I don't know what to tell people. Or
committing a crime.
Yeah, I don't want to tell people, like, don't tell anyone about this. And I also don't want to tell people, like, oh, tell your boss all your diagnoses. Like, it's different for everybody. Do what feels most comfortable to you. Like, I personally don't mind sharing with people. Like, at my last job before my breakdown, I was working in an office job and I asked for accommodations for my ADHD.
Yeah.
And that went surprisingly well. I got an extra day off because of it. And that, I think, is like one of the reasons you would want, like, I wanted a diagnosis and meds. Like, I wanted meds.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're the same. We're not like med seekers. It's more just kind of like the idea of just like, but if it helps, it's so worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, I have abused prescription meds, but to my credit, I always tell my providers when I do, and they take me off it. Like, I was on gabapentin for a long time for my anxiety, and I noticed I was just escalating my dose like bit by bit. And I was like, okay, this feels like a slippery slope.
Yeah. And I think I've talked about, like, I did the same thing when I got diagnosed with panic attacks. Then they just like threw a bunch of Xanax at me. And then when I ran out and they came back, they just threw a bunch more at me. And I got to the point where, I would see medical providers and tell them, like, if I felt like it's something I needed because I still occasionally had a panic attack, then that's what I'd say is I was just like, this is the best thing that helps me, but I only want you to prescribe me like 10. They're just for an emergency. It's not something I want to start taking more every day.
Going back to your question, the bulimia, that is a diagnosis I didn't particularly want. Maybe it's because of the stereotypes that I have.
Yeah.
It's not associated with control. It's associated with like loss of control and like extravagant spending and just sloppiness overall. At least to me, like that's, and I don't think that's uncommon.
I don't think it's uncommon, but I don't think it's everybody. I'll talk about that later when I talk about my answer.
Well, yeah, I was hurrying through my answer so we could get to yours, but I don't know. I didn't want the anorexia diagnosis, but now that I have it, sometimes like it is validating because it's a very specific, like anorexia subtype binge purge. It's more specific. And I do feel like that is more accurate to me. Like I don't eat and then I binge and purge. Like that's what I do. But I also in the past have used it as an excuse to like be more anorexic. And that's hard to admit because it's cringy as fuck. But so that's the thing. Sometimes diagnoses, for me at least, can kind of enable me. I mean, the good they do exceeds the harm, I think, for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a lot of feelings. What about you?
I love this because you're going to recognize your answer. I feel like all of your main points you're making are in my answers as well.
That doesn't surprise me.
Because for one thing, and this is, like not an easy one for me to admit, because when I say like, why did you want it? Then I feel like even though we've talked about how I didn't, I know, especially early on, I really did want an eating disorder diagnosis, and I wanted it for attention and for validation. And I think it made it especially tough then because it's like, I felt, like with that, you get this attention and validation, but I also was like too embarrassed to admit that I wanted attention and validation.
Of course.
So that was why it's like, I also didn't want it. And I just was like this huge mess that couldn't figure out what I wanted.
Yeah.
I did want the depression diagnosis for sure. And that I think was just because it had been so long and so constant that one I really did just want like the proof.
Yeah.
It almost felt like a certificate that I could hang on my wall and be like, this is why.
Well, it's so interesting that you feel that way about your depression diagnosis, but not your anorexia diagnosis. And that just plays into what we were talking about, like stereotypes.
Yeah. And I feel like that's also because like, I feel like the depression happened first, like it just started happening. So like it had already been happening for years and I'd been going through it when I knew I was like, I want this diagnosis so that people will believe it's real. Where even though I may have been doing things like without my knowledge, as soon as I knew what eating disorders were, I immediately felt like I want to be that.
Do you ever feel pressure to conform to a diagnosis?
Sometimes, or at least I think that's a reason why I like don't announce it to people and hide it from people because I'm afraid that then that's what I have to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel I kind of have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tricky because on one side, like, yes, that is who I am.
Yeah, like I can't pretend like the things I do I'm not doing. So yes, it is me.
But yeah, I also don't want it to be my entire identity. And I feel like sometimes it's really hard to get out from under the shadow of all of my diagnoses.
Yeah.
Which is why I asked about, like, do you ever outgrow them? Because at this point, I feel like I haven't. If anything, I just keep adding them on. And I'm wondering, like, when does this end?
That is frustrating.
Yeah. And then I get imposter syndrome. Like, am I just, looking for more ways to be special? Or, like, am I just bored?
Yeah.
I mean,
like, okay, I know that I deal with this thing, but it's manageable right now. So I need something else to focus on.
Well, like with the ADHD, I really, really wanted that diagnosis. I worked really hard and paid a lot of money for that diagnosis. And now that I have it, I'm just like, well, everyone has this.
Yeah, but it's, it could just be because we're like missing it and maybe more people need to be. Like maybe more people would be happier.
Well, yeah. And there is this, everyone wants to have like a rare diagnosis, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Or I shouldn't say everyone.
No, yeah.
We're talking about our experiences and our perceptions here.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, we don't really know what we're talking about all the time. And I'm sure we'll hear from our listeners what they think.
Oh, but I did want to talk more about like the why do you not want it?
Oh, yeah, please.
The first thing that I thought of is, in this especially, would be relevant to like the borderline, is I said that other people use it as an excuse. And I find that kind of lazy on their part.
I mean, that's me. I do use it as an excuse sometimes.
I don't mean using it as an excuse for yourself. I'm saying other people that just are like, oh, well, you think this because you're borderline. You think this because you're depressed. Yeah. They put you in a box that you didn't have to be put in. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm trying to think of an example from my own life.
Well, you're thinking, I'll tell you the other thing that came up when you were talking that I find really interesting, because it is common, I feel, like you said, that, people in the eating disorder world think like anorexia is the better one. But an interesting thing I realized, and this came up a lot in that book that we both read, if we ever managed to review it.
Dead Weight,
yes. Because she talks about this a lot. And I was like, okay, but every time I was in treatment, I wished that I was bulimic. Wait, what? Because I felt like they got more attention.
You've never told me this before, and I've never heard this perspective before. I'm fascinated. Please elaborate.
Because I felt like, this might be more specific to a treatment setting, or not, because I guess people outside can too. But it felt to me like everyone knew that if you are bulimic, then it's like every time you purge, you're putting yourself in severe danger. A lot of people that are anorexic, your bodies have learned to adapt. You miraculously don't show any like medical symptoms, even though you've been killing yourself, where, like bulimics, I feel like everything's all fucked up because your body is just like, why are you doing this to me?
Well, but at the same time, externally with bulimics, often it's not as obvious.
And that's why I wondered, I was like, maybe this happened more often in a treatment setting because you already know why people are there and those are the things they're monitoring. They're like, if you're already there, they're not there to monitor like, well, do you look like you need help?
Right.
They're saying like, yeah, we're sending you out for these lab tests. Yours are fucked.
That is so interesting, because I feel like this is kind of a case of the grass is always greener also.
Yeah, I thought that too. I wondered about that because people do say the other way. And I was like, okay, yeah, but I felt the opposite, just so you know, like people, I don't think you realize.
Well, yeah, like when I was in treatment, for instance, the anorexic patients, not always, but often had feeding tubes, or they had to use wheelchairs because like their body weight was so low, the staff wouldn't let them walk around. And I mean, I'll put a trigger warning at the beginning of this. And meanwhile, me, on the other hand, I thought I was having a heart attack one night and I got an EKG and they told me it was just heartburn. So I was like, man, being bulimic is so dumb.
Yeah. And to me, it felt, like, and maybe because I think both of us have said this too in treatment settings, that we kind of go a little bit into like the good girl mode.
Oh, yeah. We follow the rules. We do everything that's expected of us.
I felt like everyone was seeing it of me as it's just like, oh, yeah, she got to, like a low scary point, but, like now she's just going to improve as she works the program. But, it felt like a bulimic could be like, I managed to purge last night, somehow, even though I'm on the program. And suddenly it's like, oh, we need to like schedule all these extra appointments. You got to sign safety contracts. We're checking on you all the time and everything like that. And I was just like, meanwhile, all right, I'll just go eat my snack. Thanks.
I was about to say, like, couldn't be me because I never purged in treatment, but I did purge when I was in detox.
Right.
For my alcohol use. And honestly, my bulimia diagnosis really did affect that whole experience because when I told them, I told them in the ER that I had bulimia.
Yeah.
And it took them a long time, like 12 hours, to find a treatment center that would accept me because of that dual diagnosis.
Right.
And I didn't even consider that. And then I got there and,
and they just let you.
Yeah. I got away with it anyway. Like, It's like, what was the point?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I'm trying to think of a good question to ask for a poll.
Right. That's a great topic. Maybe we can ask listeners.
How about, do you find diagnoses helpful or hurtful? And how has this shown up in your own life?
That's good. That'll do. That'll do.
That'll do, pig.
Oh. Oh, okay. Well, I'm really excited to hear everyone's answers.
Me too.
Before we wrap up, we still have a poll out that's due next week.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're listening to this, you have about a week to answer. It is, what does self-disgust look like for you, and how does it differentiate from anger?
Yes.
If you need context, then you can listen to episode 192. And then you can also answer the question that we put out today. So,
yeah.
And we also have stickers now.
And you can leave us a voicemail and get a sticker.
Yeah. So this is a limited time promotion. I don't know how long it's going to last, but for now, if you are sending in a voicemail for the first time, then you get a sticker.
Yes. And they're awesome.
And they're awesome. I've been putting them up all over town. I've been giving them to like family members.
I know. You got to send some to me so I can do the same.
I know. I got them right after I sent you your package. I was like, man, I could have just waited another day and then been able to send them together.
I was so excited when I saw it the other day because I was like, stickers, stickers, stickers. And then, like I said, I saw the postmark was like 3 weeks ago and I was like, shit.
Yeah. Well, that was supposed to be for Christmas.
Oh.
So it was late.
Well, I will also, since we brought it up, I'll send you the picture of where it now sits in my home office.
Oh, perfect. We'll post it to our Instagram.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to go make dinner and maybe take a walk.
All right. I don't know what I'm going to do, but hopefully get outside.
Yes.
It's nice.
It is nice. And we hope you all have a lovely week.
Yes.
Bye. If you like what you heard, tell a friend about the podcast. You can send them to picklesandvodka.substack.com, where they can listen to our entire catalog and find our newest merch. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us a voice message at speakpipe.com/picklesandvodka. My personal Instagram is at xtinajumper, and Lauren's is at Lauren3_AFH. We'll see you next week.